So I am going to start with introductions, and I'll first start by introducing myself. My name is Ashley Montgomery. I'm a lead instructional coach for the Rollins Center. I've been in education for 14 years. I'm very passionate about educational equity because I believe that all children deserve to have equal access to resources and quality education to develop the knowledge and skills that they need to become successful to thrive within our society. And in my free time, I love to travel and spend time with family and friends. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-facilitator, Corinza.
Thank you, Ashley. And yes, you do like to travel. You just came back from Paris. However, I wish I was there with you. So my name's Corinza Kwamina, and I have been in education for the past 21 years. It just gives me great joy to provide the tools of the science of reading to absolutely every adult that's involved in a child's ecosystem, just to ensure that that child will be afforded that opportunity to have the choice of their path in life. And in my free time, I also love enjoying my time with my family. I have two boys, but I especially enjoy my time with my 92-year-old grandmother, watching movies with her. So just a little bit about me.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Well, for today, our goals for our session, we are going to become acquainted with the Rollins Birth to 5 impact cycle and the Cox Campus unique approach to the coaching process. And now I'm going to also, if we turn to our next page, I'm just going to talk around. Well, first of all, before I even get started onto the coaching process and instructional coaching, if we can go back to the previous slide, I just want to say how excited I am to see so many of you join us today, and that we're diving into the Rollins coaching process. And I know some of you may have joined us in our previous sessions before. We've had 3 other sessions, but for those of you who have not, just know that we are family. We love to hear your voices, your thoughts, ideas, and especially your experiences, even if you have not per se been a coach, but you've experienced coaching. We want to hear about that today. So we thrive off of your participation. And so throughout our time today, please don't be shy. Comment in the chat, unmute yourself to, dialogue with us, because Ashley and I definitely want to hear from you. So without further ado, today we will be discussing the Rollins coaching process. And many of you on this call, like I said, may have already been coaches, and some of you may not have. But our goal is to discuss the process and hope that at the end of the session that you will walk away with some takeaways and resources that you may find beneficial to your coaching experience. All right, so to continue on to our next slide, the Rollins coaching impact cycle. So the Cox Campus coaching process is carried out using a step-by-step framework known as the impact cycle. Now, this was originally devised by a coaching expert named Jim Knight. His impact cycle was designed to support educators in discovering and implementing new teaching practices for the purpose of improving child outcomes. So we here at the Rollins Center had made some modifications just to maximize the effectiveness of this process in the areas of early language and literacy development. So if you notice here, we have also created it to where there are now 6, we've made the modifications, and if you notice here, we've targeted the coaching towards best practices around birth to 5 children, and the original 3 phases that were there. Now we have 6 components that really breaks down each area around the coaching cycle. And so during our time today, we will be discussing each one of the phases in the coaching cycle. Okay, now as far as the ecosystem approach, there, as you notice on this slide, there are 9 essential ecosystem elements. Before we dive into the coaching cycle, I really want to just lift up some aspects and things that you may hear us refer to throughout the session, and things that we've also discussed in our previous session. So you may hear the term ecosystem approach, and also ecosystem measure. The ecosystem, again, is everyone that's in that child's learning environment who contribute to the development of that child. So this could include teachers, center directors, of course, the family. So basically anyone that's involved with the child. And these 9 essential elements that you see here contribute to the construction of a healthy and nurturing learning environment that supports the children's development of language and literacy. Each of these elements listed here are critical to the construction of children's brains for reading and learning. And before you can begin coaching, you must first assess and reflect on each of these elements to determine the center's priorities for improvement and where we should really direct our coaching efforts. Cox Campus also is our primary source, as Ashley has mentioned in the beginning, our Cox Campus, but it is the primary source to learn the language and literacy practices. And so as we're talking, we have dropped in our chat the link to this and also a tool that aligns each of these ecosystem elements to the courses that are on Cox Campus. So feel free to look at that at any given time. So if we can go to our next slide, just really briefly, I want to talk around this document, which is the ecosystem measure. Now, you may already have a measuring tool at your center in place to determine areas that you want to prioritize at your center. However, on Cox Campus, we also have this document, which is called the ecosystem measure. The ecosystem measure, we recommend that you, maybe your site director or any other designated individuals, complete this ecosystem measure independently based on your knowledge of the site, observations, informal conversations, and documentation that you may have with your teachers. And then during this information of gathering, it's important to maybe visit some of your classrooms if you're able to, all of them, but having a sample and taking notes of what you notice in relation to the ecosystem. And then just basically reflect on what you have learned and rate each of those 9 essential ecosystem elements that we talked about before. And these ratings will be used to determine which area you need to pay, you need the attention of the center. All right, so just in a small an example, if the center received a low rating in maybe children as conversational partners, that indicates a lack of maybe meaningful interactions between teachers and their children in most of the center's classrooms. It may just be that it also indicates that improvements are needed in that area, and the next steps would be to create a plan of action for the center. And all of these documents that I'm discussing, like I said, are going to be located in Cox Campus, and we've also dropped them in the chat again. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and she's going to dive and take us into the journey into the actual coaching cycle.
All right, thank you so much, Corinza, for that. So I want to start us off with kind of like a recap from our last session, just briefly. So we took a look into the first phase of the coaching cycle, and that was the initial conversation. And in that session, we learned that a well-executed initial conversation is vital to the success of the coaching process. It sets the stage for everything that comes later in the coaching cycle. So today, we're going to pick back up where the initial conversation left off. So for each phase of the impact cycle, we will introduce the phase and explain clearly the purpose, how to prepare for that phase, and explore how it actually unfolds using some video examples. So let's continue our journey in learning about the B5 impact cycle and explore our next phase, which is the identify phase. So we can transition to the next slide. Okay. So what happens in the identify phase? The primary function of the identify phase is to have a goal-setting conversation based on the current reality of the teacher's classroom and the previously identified ecosystem priority areas, which are the site goals. So to begin, you'll want to do some investigating. So think back to that initial conversation in our last session. There were plans to visit the teacher's classroom. We call this an informal classroom observation. And the purpose of the informal classroom observation is to gain a better understanding of what's going on both with both the teacher and the children. So during this visit, you want to be sure to take detailed notes about what you observe and where you can identify opportunities for growth. You want to pay attention to the interactions that are taking place between the teacher and the children, as well as how the teacher is supporting the ecosystem elements, particularly those that have been selected as those priority areas that Corinza mentioned. So after completing your initial or your informal visits, the next step is to share what you found with the teacher. So you will focus on what your observations have revealed, as well as any child data that's provided by the teacher. But the goal is to obtain a shared understanding of what's actually going on in the classroom and to identify where improvements can be made. So you will then work together to set a child-focused goal to see those improvements. And these goals must be focused on implementing teacher practices that directly connect to that ecosystem priority areas that we mentioned before, but they also need to be individualized based on the teacher's needs. Okay, we can transition to the next slide. Okay, so we did a couple things here. So I'm gonna slow it down and let you know what we did. I know it's a lot of steps in these phases. So we've determined this ecosystem site goal. We had that initial conversation with the teacher, and we made that informal visit to their classroom. So now this brings us into the preparation work for the identified conversation to happen. So this will require a great deal of review and reflection on what you've discovered through your investigations into that site's ecosystem and that teacher's classroom. So you will want to do a few things to prepare. You'll want to review your notes and be ready to share the information with the teacher when you meet. You will want to review the Read Right from the Start expected child outcomes. And I see that Alex dropped the link for that resource in the chat. And this document is a framework for expectations in children's development, and it will be your guide for setting child-focused goals. And then other resources that you want to review prior to the identified conversation will be the notes from the initial conversation, the ecosystem priority goals, any child data, and notes from your informal classroom visit. Okay, let's transition to the next slide. And now we're going to have an opportunity to see the identified conversation in action. I'm going to let us watch the video, and then we'll come back to reflect on what we noticed.
You shared at our initial conversation that your students seemed to be a little more difficult to engage this year. Yes. I noticed this as well when I was observing. Many of the children were off playing by themselves, but there didn't seem to be too much conversation happening.
Yes, that's very typical. They really don't talk a lot to me or to each other.
Well, as a site, one of our ecosystem priorities that's been chosen is children as conversational partners. And based on what you just told me and your child data and my observation, how do you feel about creating a goal around this for your children?
I would really like that. I've been concerned that they're not talking like I would expect them to, but I'm not really sure how to support them.
Corinza, don't worry. Together, we will choose a goal using our expected child outcomes document as a guide, and we'll create a joint action plan that will help break the steps down necessary to reach it.
So in the identify conversation, just what we talked about, it's an opportunity for you to really review your informal classroom visits with the teacher, but also to be able to identify those goals and align them with the site priority goals. And that video is on Cox Campus. So in your time of leisure, please feel free to go and access the video through the course. Okay, we can move to our next slide. All right. So after you have identified which goal areas, priority areas that you will focus on in the classroom, next you will work together to set up a child-focused SMART goals that are aligned with the ecosystem priority areas. And we call them SMART goals because they adhere to the SMART attributes. So the goals need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So similar to how you set goals at the center level, you'll be creating a joint action plan in collaboration with the teacher, and you will use that joint action plan to document the SMART goals you have set, as well as the action steps needed to achieve in those goals. And also you will list any resources that are needed, who's responsible for each step, and the date for when your goal should be completed. And I do want to highlight that we do have also an example video showing how to create SMART goals on Cox Campus. And we'll also share the video link in the chat. So please feel free to open and save the link so that you can go back and watch the video at your own leisure. So next, I'm going to pass it to Corinza, who's going to take us into our next phase of the B5 impact cycle.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So yes, the next phase of our cycle is the identify phase. And it's exactly that. The explain phase. It's exactly that. It's explaining and clarifying and expanding upon the knowledge that has been gained from the teacher taking the Cox Campus course. The coach will determine how they can best assist the teacher in learning and understanding the new teaching practices and strategies. And the coach will also invite the teacher to ask any questions that they may have that they're still circling for them around the content area. This is a great opportunity to even talk around the why before they're actually modeling and practicing the strategy. Why are we doing this? And what is the significance and the importance of this? And one thing that I have personally found to be helpful during this phase is to ask some guiding questions of my own that are content related and aim towards getting the teacher to reflect on what they've learned and how it connects to both child outcomes. And if you notice that the teacher is unable to provide, an answer to any of the guiding questions, then that may just be a sign to indicate that a further need is for more explanation around that part or that area of content. Let's transition to our next slide, which will actually show a video of the explain conversation. And in this video, I would love for you just to notice and see how you may see Diane encouraging Corinza to reflect on the talk strategy. And again, this is before she actually starts modeling that for her. So if we can share this video. We may be having technical difficulties with our video. So let's just give it a moment, but if not, I will.
Give it a moment, I'll stop sharing and try to reshare, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Okay. So in this video, Diane is, well, first of all, before we even go into the video, let's just open up our chat and also just pause for a minute, because I know that we have talked quite a bit around the cycle and what is resonating for you right now, or any thoughts around what we've already discussed, or feelings or experiences that you have had around this. If we can just open up the chat or unmute yourself. Remember, we are family and we want to hear from you.
I'm filtering through now to see if there's any questions so far. I don't see any so far.
Sounds good.
All right, I think we're good to go in the chat.
Okay. All right, so in this video, Diane actually is just clarifying and talking around the talk strategy with the teacher, which the teacher just appears to be me in this video. However, she's encouraging the teacher to kind of talk around why it's beneficial for what are the benefits for the children, because that's important. You don't just want to be doing something just to be doing it, or, you really want to know, how is this going to affect and have, I will see the progress of the child's outcomes. All right, so let's move on to we don't have any slides. So let's just give this a second.
Reshare and audio. So thank you for your patience and stay tuned. Hello.
Great, thank you, Shantae.
Thank you all for your patience during this time. The world of technology.
Out of curiosity, how many of us on the call are coaches already?
What really stood out?
Oh, I think we have sound.
So where do we want to start it, Corinza? I think it's
The Meaningful Conversations course, and you have a better understanding of talk. I'd love to hear what really stood out to you from the course.
The thing that really made an impression on me is that I realized that I do a lot of talking, but I don't really ask many questions. And the questions that I tend to ask are closed questions. I had no idea that I was discouraging conversations by doing this.
I understand. Learning to ask open-ended questions, it was a game changer for me too. Open-ended questions really encourage children to share their own thoughts. And because they don't have a right or a wrong answer, they make children equal partners in the conversation. You know, I have some resources that I can share with you around this, and we can spend some time practicing this together if you'd like.
I would love that. I think it will be helpful to practice with you.
We will schedule that today before I leave. For me, the talk strategy really helped me to rethink the way I engage children in conversations. How do you imagine it benefiting the children in your classroom?
Once I'm comfortable with the talk strategy, I feel like the children will have so many more opportunities to engage in conversations. I never really thought about having conversations with the children before.
And how will this benefit their language development?
They will have more opportunities to hear and use language, which will help build their vocabulary.
Right. And that connects directly to the goal that you chose on your joint action plan.
All right. Thank you so much. So yeah, I know we spoke about it earlier, but just lifting up, would anyone like to just tune in and just talk to us around like what you noticed in that conversation, in that dialogue? How was the coach able to encourage the teacher to reflect, on the strategy on their own? If we can go back to the other slide, sorry.
Completed the meaning.
What did you notice? And we did talk around it already, but just how she actually said, how will it benefit the language of your children, and really allowing the teacher to kind of, but actually think through and reflect and really respond to the importance of why
The meaningful conversation.
There is that importance. Okay, so let's move on and transition to our next slide.
And one more thing, Kearns, I do want to add before we move on, I'm sorry, that I loved how Diane as a coach kind of reassured the teacher around her support and that she would be there. And she also offered, resources and opportunities to practice. So I did want to highlight that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that too. Yes, the resources is definitely a great key. And just knowing that this whole process is nervous. I mean, the anticipation of like not knowing what's happening. And she really did do a great job of that. So thanks for lifting that up, Ashley, that she reassured the teacher that she's going to be there with her every step of the way and support her. And another document that we would love just to share with you in the chat. It's important before you go into any modeling or guided practice phase that there needs to just be a meeting prior to that session. And this is just a check-in with the teacher beforehand to make sure that you're both on the same page in terms of where you are, where we're going. It doesn't need to be a lengthy meeting, just a quick check-in, 10 or 15-minute conversation to really set clear expectations, preview the exercise that's about to take place, answer any questions. And this checklist really goes through like being intentional around setting the time, what we're going to be using as far as the fidelity form, talking around the fidelity form. And the fidelity form is a checklist, which we are dropping in the chat also, but it's a checklist of the strategy that I may be modeling, and for the teacher to be able to use this checklist in order to see, all of the things and elements of that strategy. And so just having everything in place and talking around what the expectations are before you actually go into the modeling phase. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley to start taking us into that journey into the modeling guided practice.
Yes, thank you, Corinza. Okay, so my favorite part of the B5 impact cycle, which is the modeling and guided practice. So now we're deep into the cycle and we're ready to move beyond the initial exploration and the learning phase into practical application portion of the coaching process. We wrapped up the previous phase by providing opportunities for the teacher to practice what they've learned. This is where the practice kind of really takes off in this phase. So in addition to what we've already covered, there are two more methods for a teacher to practice implementing new strategies, and that's through modeling and guided practice. And both are necessary for the continuation of the coaching process. So let's transition to the next slide to talk more about the modeling. Okay, so what happens during the modeling portion? So this portion of the impact cycle is also referred to, our little motto, as the I do. So the I do refers to the instructional coaches demonstrating new teaching practices through modeling. Modeling is important because it is most likely the first time the teacher sees the practice being used in a real life classroom situation. The teacher will learn by watching how the coach puts the practice into action and will follow along with the fidelity form like Corinza mentioned before. We have a fidelity form for everyone to practice. It can be found on Cox Campus. And then I know that Alex already dropped a link for that resource in our chat. And so we'll be, bringing up that fidelity form again later on in our presentation. And the one that we've chosen today to bring was the talk practice, since most of our videos covers that skill or that practice. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So how do we prepare for this modeling phase? And what do we need to prepare for the I do portion? We want to make sure that we always model before moving into that guided practice phase. So the teacher needs to see the practice demonstrated before they can be expected to do it on his or her own. In order to give a strong performance for the teacher, we need to learn from, we have to be well prepared before entering the classroom. And just to note, we all know that classrooms can be really unpredictable at times, but the more preparation that we have, the better our demonstration will be. So it's important to rehearse our modeling and brush up on our own knowledge. We want to review everything that we've already covered throughout the earlier phases of the impact cycle. And then lastly, we want to set a time to have a preliminary meeting with the teacher, just as Corinza stated before. That meeting will be so important and a staple throughout the coaching process. So we can transition to the next slide. So we are going to take a look at a model I do. But before we do that, I just want to point out a few things that I want to highlight. You want to make sure that you always arrive on time before the model. You want to make sure during the day of the model, you want to be ready to begin exactly when you said that you would. In our previous session, we talked a lot about reliability and it being one of the key elements to building trust in a coaching relationship. So we want to make sure that we don't betray that trust with that teacher by missing any appointments or showing up late. You will also want to have, like we said, to prepare all of your materials on hand and ready to go that day. So if you're modeling and it requires books or resources or anything else, it's best to bring everything with you. And you want to make sure that the teacher has what they need to follow along with your modeling. You want to be aware of the class size and how many children will be present during your modeling. And you also want to have something for the teacher to take notes. And in our case, we use the fidelity form as mentioned previously. So before we take a look at Diane modeling the I do of the talk practice, I want you to be aware of a few things. In the example that you're about to see, Diane will only be modeling for one child, but more often than not, you will be modeling in front of a full class. Modeling is typically done in a live classroom situation. However, if external factors prevent you from visiting the classroom, video can also be used as an alternative. So you can simply record yourself modeling the strategy for a teacher, and then you could send that video to the teacher to watch and review with a fidelity form where she's able to take notes on the strategy that you are implementing. And I also want to note something in this video. You will see just the coach and the child during the model. But typically, if we were in a live classroom, the teacher will be off to the side in close proximity with their own fidelity form, taking notes as you would model. So let's go ahead and take a look at the video and we'll come back and to reflect.
Jackson, I noticed that you found the life cycle cards that I put in the Slant Center this morning. You know what I'm wondering? I'm wondering if you're thinking about this book that we read yesterday about the life cycle of a frog.
Yeah.
You're remembering that? Do you remember how a real tadpole turns into a frog? Do you want to look at the cards and see if you can show me, if we can figure it out? How does it start?
We can play a card guessing game.
Okay,
So we guess the first card that before the tadpole starts and changes to frog.
Okay, which one is that? What is that? Tell me about that picture.
Eggs.
What's inside those eggs?
The tadpole.
Oh, the tadpoles and their eggs. Let's see and what's happening here?
It happens.
Let's look at all of them. Maybe we spread them out and then we can see them all. Okay, so look at this one. These are the eggs. And then you said they come out. What comes out of the egg? What hatches? The hatches. Look at these over here. Do you think those hatch out? Or do you think those?
Tadpoles.
The tadpoles, do these hatch out of the egg?
No.
Okay, put the ones that hatch out.
I don't know what I don't know what is a tadpole.
You know what? I think you're right. I think that these are smaller. See how they're younger? Those are the young tadpoles. And then they get bigger. So do you think maybe this one comes next?
Yeah.
Okay, so they hatch out of the egg and they're young tadpoles. And then what happens to them? Do they grow?
Yeah.
So which tadpole shows that he's getting a little bit bigger? Oh yeah, you want to put that one next to that? And look at that. And why do you think those tadpoles, why are they living in the water now? Let's look at you want to look at our book? I'm thinking, see right here? There are tadpoles here and they're living in the water because look, they don't have any legs.
But why are the eggs going into the water and why are the eggs going out of the water?
You know what? That's a good question. I think that those eggs, those spawn, I think they're floating on the water. And I think that in the picture, it shows them underneath and on top because it's a big group of eggs and they're all floating on the water. And then look, there's the young tadpole just like you did. And then there's the tadpole and they've gotten bigger. And then what happens to the tadpole?
You know what? I think we should do a guessing game and the ones we already founded, we put them right here.
Okay, let's do that. So you've got the eggs and then how do the tadpoles get out of the egg? They
crack.
Yeah, they crack open, they hatch out. They hatch out of the eggs. And then what happens? They're little here. What happens? What happened? He got
bigger.
He grew, he got bigger. His body's changing. And then what happens to the tadpole? What's going on there?
Little legs.
He's getting little legs. And then look at our picture here. He grows back legs, and then what happens?
He has backer legs.
That's right, he gets more legs. Do you remember what he's called when he's this guy? Do you remember what that guy's called? It's a froglet. A froglet, that's right. He's a froglet. And you know what? Now that he's got legs,
he is a frog.
So cute. I love that video. And as Alex mentioned in the chat, yes, this is of Diane with the talk strategy. She is asking a lot of open-ended questions and also lifting that language. She's doing a fabulous job. We want to take a moment to reflect and just kind of hear from you all to hear, is there anyone with any experiences they want to share as far as like modeling a strategy in the classroom? What have been some of your experiences with modeling in classrooms as coaches? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute. We love to hear from you.
I'm not a coach, but I've used the talk strategy and I put it in the chat how much I love it. Working with infants and toddlers, a lot of times parents don't realize that they can talk to their children, even though their children are not using words yet.
Absolutely.
Being able to share that with parents and seeing them come alive because they realize I can communicate with my baby and my baby communicates back with me with movements and facial expressions and sounds that they're making and all of that. And even why the child is doing that with you and you're talking to that baby, you're building that baby's vocabulary. And so that they're going to be able to have more words to use when they do start talking, to be able to communicate. And so I just wanted to share that because it just was a delight to me to learn that through Cox Campus, and then to be able to talk with parents about it and then being able to be encouraged by it.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Patricia. And it's so important. I'm glad that you are sharing that information with parents because, parents are their child's first teacher. And the more that we can share information with parents and, let them know what's happening in the classroom, the better. So I'm so excited that you're building that relationship with your parents and having those conversations around the strategies that you're using in your classrooms. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. And I remember you from our last call. So thank you for being open to being the first one to unmute and dialogue with us. And absolutely, it's a delight to hear your experience around talk. And in the chat, we also have Kanisha that said talk strategy is for all stakeholders. Absolutely. Everybody needs to be involved with talk in your center. I mean, this goes for who's at the reception. If there's someone who supports in the kitchen, everyone needs to be on board, and especially those families. So just as Patricia uplifted earlier, making sure that we relay that and really talk with our parents too on the importance of talk. And so we're definitely going to see a lot more of the talk strategy as we go through our session today too. But thank you so much for Kanisha for sharing your thoughts, and anyone else that wants to share, feel free in the chat or unmute yourself. Yes, shared modeling is a good strategy when working with the teachers. Yes.
Yep, absolutely. And I know for me that modeling is one of really my favorite parts of the cycle because as a coach, it really gives you that opportunity to spend time in the classroom, interacting with the children and being able to model, that implementation for the teacher. So Corinza, do you have any thing you want to share?
For me, I often look back to where I've actually had teachers say, well, you know what? I see that video on Cox Campus, but my class is different or my kids are different. And I've seen where coaches have actually been able to go into the classroom, implement the strategy with the reality of what's happened or what's being faced in that classroom and see those results and just seeing that teacher say, hey, this actually really does work. So really the modeling is just key to everything. So
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, we can move to the next slide. All right, if we can go back just one, Shantae, for us. All right. And so I know that Corinza earlier had talked about the preliminary meeting. So just as we open the session with a preliminary meeting, we will once again need to check in with the teacher after having concluded that modeling or guided practice session. So we call this a debriefing conversation. So it will be like a mainstay throughout the remainder of the phases within the impact cycle. But for modeling, debriefing should be a shared exploration of what the teacher observed and how they interpreted your demonstration of the new teaching practice. The debriefing conversation is an opportunity to go over the data that they collected using that fidelity form that we talked about and asking guiding questions. The conversation also allows time for the teacher to ask questions on their own. Perhaps they maybe misinterpreted something or had trouble following along with parts of the strategy. So this will be your time to kind of clarify that, provide any clarification around where the needs are, and then be able to link your answers back to those goals and that have been set for the improving child outcomes. And then lastly, you will use the joint action plan to set a time and place for your upcoming guided practice. Okay, so now we can move to the next slide when Corinza is going to be talking about the guided practice part.
Thank you, Ashley. So yes, the we do. I love this part because this happens right after the I do, as Ashley said. And this is where the coach and the teacher work together through the guided practice sessions. This is more of an interactive exercise as well as collaborative effort. And the teacher will be the one implementing the practice, and the coach will be assisting by providing real-time feedback and jumping in with guidance whenever needed. And we often call this in the moment coaching. And it's a great opportunity for the teacher to apply what they have learned in an actual classroom setting without the pressure of doing it on their own. And so as we transition to the next slide, very quickly, I just want to talk around how we prepare for the guided practice. Again, we use that preliminary checklist, and we also lift up some other components like the coaching cards or whisper coaching. We review the joint action plan just to say, hey, this is the goal that you've decided that you want to work on for your children, and also plan for the guided practice. And so if we go to our next slide, here is actually an example, and in the chat, we are going to drop an example of the coaching cards. And so I want to talk around the different options on how to carry out a guided practice. You could use coaching cards as visual indicators for each component of the teaching strategy, or you can simply whisper coach, which is being closer to that teacher and just whispering and guiding her through that. And so this is an example of whisper coaching and coaching cards. If we can play the whisper coaching first.
I noticed that you created what is this that you made? Can you tell me about this?
Tadpoles.
You've created tadpoles?
Yeah, these are the lines, and this is the face.
I see. I noticed you do have the face there.
And this is the start of the face.
This is the question. I wonder how this frog became this. How did it become a frog from the tadpole?
Tadpole.
Talk to him about how it.
All right, great.
Notice.
So notice how the teacher's very close by, not distracting, and really just getting a feel for what your teacher feels comfortable with, because some definitely may say, no, please don't talk to me while I just show me the coaching cards from across. One thing I do want to just be mindful of is if you do plan on using the coaching cards, go through the coaching cards beforehand just to familiarize your teacher with the coaching cards, because you don't want to hold them up and they're like, wait, what does this mean? So this would be also part of that preliminary conversation if they choose the coaching cards, to go over the coaching cards. So if we can just play a snippet of the coaching cards video.
That you
So this is
created
what is and that's the egg.
That's the egg. Yeah, you're right. That is an egg. What is this?
Paper.
That is paper. Is this? Let's see what's next.
Sorry, I skipped to the page.
Yeah, we don't want to skip any pages. I love that. Can you tell me about that one?
So these are the lines.
Thank you so
So
much.
these are lines, and
These are the face.
All right. So as you notice, he definitely didn't want me to miss any of his pages of his book, but the coach is really across from me and showing me and cueing me, ask open-ended questions, smile, come down to the proximity of the child. And so I'm being cued throughout all of that. So maybe this is an option that you would feel that you would like to share with your teachers, and they may feel more comfortable having the coaching card. So those are two options. All right, so we want to move into our next phase of the cycle, which is the observe, which is a very exciting phase. I also refer to this as the you do, and it's exactly that. It's where the teacher is doing this. This is when the teacher is doing it without any guidance, any assistance, and the coach is simply watching carefully, taking notes with accuracy around the implementation that's happening in the classroom. And so if we can turn to a transition to the next slide. In preparation for this, we just really want to make sure that we put the teacher at ease about this, because this is the stressful time for them. This is when we're actually observing them and taking notes and using that fidelity form. So if we can just play this video quickly.
Make sure today at 10:45 will still work for me to do my observation. Over the last couple of weeks, we have dug deeper into learning about the talk strategy. You've watched me, we've implemented it together, and now it's my turn to watch you do the strategy.
Yes, today works great. I have been practicing, but I am a little nervous to have you watch me.
Corinza, many teachers feel this way at first. Remember that I am there to support you. This is a judgment-free exercise. Sometimes teachers find it helpful if I sit off to the side so they don't see me. Do you think this would make it any easier?
Yes, I do. That would be great.
Perfect. I will make sure to be out of your line of vision. During the observation, I will be completing the fidelity form, just like you did when I modeled. We can use it to review and then to plan for the next steps at our debrief meeting later this afternoon. Remember, it is not a report card. It is a tool to help us stay focused on the indicators of talk. I will write down observations and notes, giving us a way to focus on the strategy.
All right. So yes, this was a great way just to reassure the teacher. Again, don't be nervous. I'm here to help. I'm just writing down some notes and then letting her know that we will have feedback after. The observation typically occurs in person. However, there are times that maybe your teacher feels more comfortable with just recording themselves without you being there. And I just want to lift up video coaching really quickly, how powerful it can be, because in many times the teacher may not really even notice that they've done something, but when they watch it back on a recording, they're like, wow, I really did do a good job in this. Or, oh, I really noticed how I did miss this, or I wasn't able to, really tune into the child or what have you, or lift language. So just note, video coaching is definitely a valuable tool to review for the teacher and also for the coach. Now let's move on to our next slide, which I am very excited about because this is observe in action. So this is where now the teacher is saying, okay, I'm going to do it by myself. And we are dropping in the chat a talk fidelity form. With this talk fidelity form, it's a lengthy document. However, it just kind of states the things that the coach would be using to determine if the teacher is catching all of the elements and the components of talk. And so we have that in the chat for you. And actually, as we play the video, it's your choice. You can kind of look at the talk fidelity form and see if you are noticing some of the things that the teacher is doing, or you can just simply watch the video. And we would love to hear your thoughts around what you can see, highlight the great things that the teacher is doing with this talk conversation. Okay, if we can play the video, please.
Successful observation requires a keen eye for detail. So remain attentive and engage with the teacher's implementation from start to finish. Document the areas where you can identify room for improvement, but also celebrate the areas where the teacher is doing a phenomenal job already. In a moment, Diane will be observing Corinza's implementation of the talk strategy with Jackson. And we'll be there too, looking on from the coach's perspective and taking notes on what we've observed. Do your best to follow along using the talk fidelity form and take note of which indicators of the strategy are present in Corinza's interaction with Jackson. You'll be using these notes in the next step, so be prepared to share what you've observed. Okay, get that fidelity form ready and we'll join in on Diane's observation.
I noticed that you're really creating a beautiful piece of artwork. Can you tell me more about it?
So these are rocks, these are seaweed, that's the fish, and this is the wall where the frog climbs up, and that's the seaweed.
I think this is a beautiful piece of art. I wonder why the frog is climbing out of the water and why is the fish in the water?
Because he needed legs to climb out of the water.
Oh, so I'm thinking that these are different. The frog has legs and the fish
Doesn't.
It doesn't. I wonder how the frog ended up getting his legs.
He climbed it up here.
He did. It looks like your fish looks a little sad.
Yeah. Oh, I see something that needs to be in the picture.
What needs to be in the picture?
Water.
Yeah, I think so. Who needs to have water? Is it the
fish?
I wonder why the fish needs water.
Because he needs to breathe.
Oh, I think you're right. I think a fish has something called gills.
Yeah, he does.
And they have to have those in order to breathe underwater. I wonder if we have gills. Can we breathe underwater forever? No.
These are goggles need to go open and then you can go back in the water.
Yes, we can only stay in the water for a little while, and we use goggles to protect our eyes.
You know what? Sometimes when we can't to go under the water for too long, you know what? If there's a whale there, to hold on it and try to not let go of it.
Oh, in the water.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I see that the fish is actually swimming in the water, and he really looks sad. I wonder why they got separated. Why are they separated?
Oh, you're on mute, Karenza. Oh, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me
Great.
now?
Yes.
I went in and out. Okay. Yeah, we could go on and listen to this conversation. He was a joy to speak with and do the talk strategy with. But we want to hear from you. What feedback would you give this teacher? What are some highlights that you saw in this conversation, this talk conversation?
Well, I know
What-
for me, Karenza, just starting out, I'll start us off. I love her proximity. She was in close proximity, eye level with the child. She asked a lot of open-ended questions. I don't want to give too much.
Don't
I
give
want to
too
hear from
much.
someone
I think
else. Those are my two lendings.
Marianne is saying that she tuned in.
Yep.
And based it off of what the child stated. It was definitely child-led and she was meeting the child in what he wanted to talk to. Even when he pulled out goggles in the conversation, she restated that and then also added vocabulary just to kind of say, yeah, it does protect our eyes. So really led by the child's interest. Thank you so much for mentioning that, Marianne. Anyone else? And again, you can always unmute yourself. All right. Okay, well, keep pondering on that. What we would like to do now is just go over to our next slide. And we want to just close out around the improve phase. So after the teacher has done that observe phase, which is the I do, depending on how that goes, and also if the goals have been met for the children, the child-centered goals, you would just take that time to reflect on that teacher's strengths and realizing, are we now ready to go ahead and choose a next goal to work on? Or do we need to continue to go back to maybe some more modeling and then go back through and allow the teacher to have another opportunity? So one thing I just want to say through the improve phase is that it's a phase where it's determined on how the teacher feels, where she is. Has the goals been accomplished for the children also? And it definitely just having patience in this time. So it's not that it will happen in one go round, and sometimes it may happen, but then in other cases, maybe you will have to go back and maybe reiterate explaining it again or modeling again. So just having that patience in that time. If we can go to slide 32, and we are now ready to close out. We just want to hear from you. What is one takeaway or insight that you got from today's discussion today?
Or maybe something that's still circling.
Yes.
Marianne loves the coaching cards.
Thank you, Marianne. Those are great. And like we said, they're in the chat, everything that we talked around today. So I would love to hear how you implement those and how it works amongst your teachers.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Anyone else? Okay.
I think we can move to our next slide, which is letting you know that we have this wraps up the coaching year-long journey sessions for this school year. We look forward to connecting with you next school year. But our journey continues on elsewhere. So we are having the Birth Through 5 ecosystem supporting dual language learners tomorrow, April 19th from 3 to 4. So we would love for you to join that session. And then next slide, if you're new to Cox Campus, and if you have not already done so, please be sure to create a membership. It's completely free and always accessible. And we'll drop the link so that you're able to register for free.
And I believe it's Marianne. You have a question here. Can we do it whole group?
Uh-oh, let me go back.
If you could just unmute and tell us a little bit more about that before. I want to make sure.
A lot of the videos were just one-on-one conversations with children, which can tend to be easier as far as like having those deep conversations. I just wanted to know if you had any insight on whole group and how you do this with whole group or just examples of it.
Absolutely. Thank you for lifting that up. I appreciate that so much because the reality of it is usually the conversations are going to be in whole group. We actually recorded this during our COVID space. And so usually all of our recordings are usually in that whole group setting. However, it would still maintain the same practices behind the work. Of course, as far as the actual talk strategy, it is more mindful for the teacher to be able to be attentive to more than one child and also still continue to lift that language in different conversations in the classroom. So yes, definitely we recommend that it is for whole group because that's the reality of our classrooms. Do you have anything you wanted to add to, Ashley, to that?
Yeah, and just like, having, like Corinza said, those more individualized conversations, it could be during play or outdoors. And we always want to be inviting and allow other children to come into the conversation. So if you are interested in watching that meaningful conversation course that we have online, it'll talk about striving for 5 and really having those back and forth exchanges at least 5 times with one child. So really modeling how that sentence structure, that back and forth conversation goes. So it can be in whole group, it can be in smaller. So the talk strategy is really versatile. You can use it throughout the day within your classroom. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Kimberly, yes, definitely this can be applied for older students who may need more support around vocabulary and schema. And if you are working in that space of our K-3 or, older students, we also do have Cox Campus courses around even having meaningful conversations with those children also in that K-3 space. So please, everything that we've talked about today is on Cox Campus. If you have not seen our coaching course, we definitely would encourage you to. And I know there's many of you that have given praises to the talk strategy. So if you're not familiar with that, please check out our Meaningful Conversations course also, and it will go more in depth in the actual course, in the actual strategy.
Yep. And we want to keep this conversation going. So, of course, we have different types of platforms you can reach us on. We have Facebook. We have join our private Facebook group and Cox Community. We're always posing questions. It's a great place for teachers and educators to get together and have conversations. And you can find us on Twitter and also LinkedIn. We want to know, how did we do today? So a poll is going to pop up and just let us know, answer the questions. And we really greatly appreciate everyone's time today. I hope it's sunny where you are so you can enjoy the nice spring weather that we're having here. And we just enjoy our time together. And thank you so much for coming.